The 11th chapter, The Prince. By the edge of the river they stopped and said farewell. This took a long time, because all those thousands of monkeys wanted to shake John Dolittle by the hand. Afterward, when the doctor and his pets were going on alone, Polynesia said, "We must tread softly, and talk low as we go through the land of the Jolliginki. If the king should hear us, he will send his soldiers to catch us again, for I am sure he is still very angry over the trick I played on him." "What I am wondering," said the doctor, "is where we are going to get another boat to go home in." "Oh, well, perhaps we'll find one lying on the beach that nobody is using. Never lift your foot till you come into the stile." One day, while they were passing through a very thick part of the forest, Chee-Chee went ahead of them to look for coconuts. And while he was away, the doctor and the rest of the animals, who did not know the jungle paths as well, got lost in the deep woods. They wandered around, but nobody could find their way down the seashore. Chee-Chee, when he could not see them anywhere, was terribly upset. He climbed high trees and looked out from the top branches to try and see the doctor's high hat. He waved and shouted. He called to all the animals by name. But it was no use. They seemed to have disappeared altogether. Indeed, they had lost their way very badly. They had strayed a long way off the path, and the jungle was so thick with bushes and creepers and vines that sometimes they could hardly move at all, and the doctor had to take out his pocket knife and cut the way along. They stumbled into the wet, boggy places. They got all tangled up in thick, convulsive runners. They scratched themselves on thorns, and twice they nearly lost their medicine bag in the underbrush. There seemed no end to their troubles, and nowhere could they come upon a path. At last, after blundering about like this for many days, getting their clothes torn and their faces covered with mud, they walked right into the king's back garden by mistake. The king's men came running up at once and caught them, but Polynesia flew into a tree in the garden without anybody seeing her and hid herself. The doctor and the rest were taken before the king. "Ha ha!" cried the king. "So you are caught again. This time you shall not escape. Take them all back to prison and put double locks on the door. This man shall scrub my kitchen floor for the rest of his life." So the doctor and the pets were led back to prison and locked up, and the doctor was told that in the morning he must begin scrubbing the kitchen floor. They were all very unhappy. "This is a great nuisance," said the doctor. "I really must get back to Puddleby. That poor sailor will think I've stolen his ship if I don't get home soon. I wonder if those hinges are loose." But the door was very strong and firmly locked. There seemed no chance of getting out. Then Gub-Gub began to cry again. All this time Polynesia was still sitting in the tree in the palace garden. She was saying nothing and blinking her eyes. This was always a very bad sign when Polynesia, whenever she said nothing and blinked her eyes. It meant that somebody had been making trouble, and that she was thinking out some way to put things right. People who made out trouble for Polynesia or her friends were nearly always sorry for it afterward. Presently she spied Chee-Chee swinging through the trees, and still looking for the doctor when Chee-Chee saw her. He came into her tree and asked her what had become of him. "The doctor and all his animals have been caught by the king's men and locked up again," whispered Polynesia. "We lost our way in the jungle and blundered into the palace garden by mistake." "But you couldn't guide them?" asked Chee-Chee, and he began to scold the parrot for letting them get lost while he was away looking for coconuts. "It was all the stupid pig's fault," said Polynesia. "He would keep running off the path hunting for ginger root, and I was kept so busy catching him and bringing him back, and I turned to the left instead of the right, and when we reached the swamp— Shh! Look, there's Prince Bumpo coming into the garden. He must not see us. Don't move, whatever you do." And there, sure enough, was Prince Bumpo, the king's son, opening the garden gate. He carried a book of fairy tales under his arm. He came strolling down the gravel walk, humming a sad song, till he reached a stone seat right under a tree, where the parrot and the monkey were hiding. Then he lay down on his seat and began to read the fairy stories to himself. Chee-Chee and Polynesia watched him, keeping very quiet and still. "Chee-Chee," Polynesia whispered, "I have an idea. Maybe I can hypnotize him." "What good will that do?" Chee-Chee whispered back. "When you've been hypnotized, you sort of go to sleep, and you'll do whatever you've been told to do, even after you wake up. If I can put the prince in a trance, I'll tell him to unlock the prison and let the doctor out." "Well, it's worth a try," Chee-Chee said. "How will you do it?" "Just watch me, and don't move," Polynesia whispered, and she slid very quietly down the branch on which she was perched until she was closer to the prince. Clutching a smaller twig, she slowly began waving it in front of him and making a low humming sound in her throat. Prince Bumpo saw the twig singing to and fro, and soon his eyes started to close. After a moment, Polynesia spoke in a quiet, soothing voice. "Bumpo, Prince Bumpo, there is something you must do." Prince Bumpo smiled gently in his sleep. "In thy father's prison?" the parrot said, There lies a famous wizard, John Dolittle by name. Many things he knows of medicine and magic, and mighty deeds he has performed. Yet thy kingly father leaves him languishing. Long and lingering hours go to him, brave Bumpo, secretly when the sun has set. But first, prepare him a ship in which we may sail away far from these unfriendly shores. Then, go and unlock the prison doors. Let the great wizard and his animals go free. Again, the sleeping prince smiled.